YouTube, youtube.com/Clay Kane Show, youtube.com/Clay Kane Show. What's up, y'all? And be sure to follow Reecie Colbert as well. Go to youtube.com/Black Women Views to follow Reecie Colbert. Want to remind y'all, if you want to get a copy, pre-order my book, Burn Down Master's House. You can pre-order wherever books are sold. Barnes & Noble, they are offering a 25% off for their premium and rewards members. And also Strand is offering a special for the first 1,000 people to get a signed copy of Burn Down Master's House. You can go to strandbooks.com. I want to read an early review for Burn Down Master's House. They wrote, "A descendant of Audre Lorde's rage and James Baldwin's fire, this book will burn down your complacency." I was saying that earlier.
Ooh,
So
yes.
that was fire to hear. Mm-hmm. All right, so Reecie, I want to go back to a year ago today.
Lord Jesus.
1 year ago today, this actor named George Clooney, he released an op-ed about President Joe Biden 12 days after Joe Biden's debate against the convicted felon, Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he did. And in the op-ed, he said, "I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee." Yes, George Clooney wrote that. Because George Clooney has all the answers, Sway. And I want to read you two small pieces from this op-ed in the New York Times from George Clooney. He said, because he has all the predictions too, "We are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House and we're going to lose the Senate. This isn't only my opinion. This is the opinion of every senator and Congress member and governor who I've spoken with in private."
Mm.
Then George Clooney went on to say, 1 year ago today, "Let's hear from Wes Moore and Kamala Harris and Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom and Andy Beshear and J.P. Pritzker and others. Let's agree that the candidates not attack one another, but in the short time we have, focus on what will make this country soar. Then we could go into the Democratic convention next month and figure it out." Because he wanted that brokered convention, which has always resulted in the opposing party winning.
Yeah.
Would it be messy? Yes. Democracy is messy. But it would enliven our party and wake up voters who long before the June debate had already checked out. It sure would. That's Oscar winner George Clooney.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're supposed to pretend. A lot of folks want to pretend that George Clooney, Rob Reiner, and others, they aren't part of the reason we're watching democracy burn in real time, maybe. Because Trumpism was already foaming at the mouth, right? George Clooney, rich, privileged, insulated, went to the New York Times to babble about Biden, not in private, not in a strategy session, but publicly, because he had all the answers. And what pissed me off the most, Reecie, is he basically handed MAGA more of the talking points.
Mm-hmm.
They got more of the talking points, more of the headlines, as Trump was the convicted felon and he was supposed to be sentenced in July originally.
Yep, that's true.
And now look where we are. Medicaid, gutted. The black unemployment rate, increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Terror from frickin' hell. All that bullshit. And he was wrong. Now, there's no way to know if Biden would have won. No way to know that, obviously. There's no way to know. But I will always stand by him and others waging this war on Joe Biden for 3 weeks. It made it impossible for Kamala Harris to win. And I don't think he really wanted Kamala Harris to be the nominee. I really don't.
Well, he did. I mean, obviously he didn't. Look at what he wrote.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't forget, these donors never really wanted her,
Mm-hmm.
never really defended her, never really backed her. So Joe Biden had a rough night, but you, George, and the folks like you lit the match and watched it burn. Helped out. It was 3 weeks of infighting, the media meltdowns, and now we're staring fascism right in the face. And I will stand by George Clooney's little op-ed didn't accomplish anything. It only hurt us. And you could have said it behind the scenes. You could have did anything but do an opinion piece in the New York Times. I didn't know you were elected official. A year later, July 10th, 2024. And that's where folks get pissed off, because it appeared that George Clooney and others had more control over the Republican Party than Joe Biden did. That's what it appeared. That's what it appeared. And so I always say two things could have happened. Joe Biden could have stayed in the race, and we don't know who would have won or lost. We don't know. A part of me believes that I think if he would have lost, he would have lost by a smaller margin, because I think a lot of people did not want to vote for Kamala Harris. I know you feel differently, Reecie, but I feel like a lot of people did not want a black woman in that role. So it might have been a higher voter turnout in Pennsylvania. Or what could have happened is they could have did all this behind the scenes and not damage the runway for Kamala Harris to win. They could have been this quiet and cute, and it would have been smoother and different. But either way, all that, there was no way to come back from that. And I just want to remind people, a year ago, this was the foolishness. And when I saw him come out, I said, oh, here we go. Here we go. I know he gives a lot of money. I know that he donates, but your op-ed, damn. And Corinne Jean-Pierre said it. She said, I've never seen anything like this before. I'd never seen. It was 4 months before an election. 4 months. Kamala Harris is not Superwoman. She's not your magic. 4 months before an election, they do this. If they felt this way, they should have been said it. And in this op-ed, he said, oh, I saw him at a fundraiser 2 weeks ago, or whatever you saw him. Then you should have been said it then. And lastly, I'll say, I don't trust polls, but for those who believe in polls, the polls didn't shift after that debate. There wasn't a big shift in the numbers. So yeah, just want to remind people, a year ago, good old George became the leader of the Democratic Party and helped burn it down. I thought it was trifling, and I still think it's trifling. Reecie Colbert, your thoughts?
I think we just disagree. We always disagree on this topic. I mean, what's his name? George Clooney ain't shit. And a lot of people were trying to push out both Joe Biden and Kamala, but they couldn't say that, because then they knew that it would be hell to pay. We would have lost with Joe Biden, though. Joe Biden wasn't going to be able to do it. He just wasn't. I'm sorry. There was no polling to suggest that he was going to be able to do it. If you don't believe the polls, okay. But I saw the man. I saw Joe Biden. Bless his heart. That's a good man, Savannah. I saw him many times over the years, because I did a lot of stuff at the White House. And I thought, oh, okay, Joe getting old. I was like, oh, what's going on with Joe? Ooh. That was my reaction at least 3 times before that debate. Like, oh, what is going on with Joe? But, there were times where he delivered as well. And so You know, people want to, I feel like Joe was not winning when he dropped out. He was not winning. The polls did not have him comfortably ahead. They had him down, and the polls were going in the wrong direction. And Joe Biden was not going to be able to assuage people's concerns. So, yeah, Kamala didn't win. So we know that she didn't win. I thought she could have won. I thought that the thing that George Clooney was talking about, the party would be invigorated and da 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 da. She brought all of that energy, but then she pivoted. She pivoted way too hard to Liz Cheney, trying to get the white women and the so-called never Trumpers. That was, to me, that was a mistake, you know. But a lot of things cause you to lose. There's no one thing that causes you to lose.
Right.
But Joe wasn't it. I'm sorry, he wasn't it. And to be honest, he should have stepped aside right after the debate. Like, I blame Joe for being stubborn, for not stepping aside. You ain't got it. If you ain't got it, then nobody should have had to drag him kicking and screaming out of the race. But he stayed in to be humiliated and to be dragged by everybody. And so, you know, he made it worse for himself by not stepping aside. You got to deliver. I'm sorry. You got to deliver. And he didn't deliver. And not only did he not deliver, but he fucked up so bad. That was the worst debate performance that I've ever seen, that confirmed every single negative narrative about his age had been an issue for years, according to the polling. So I know that there are a lot of people who never thought that Kamala had a chance, but I just don't understand where this faith in Joe Biden being able to win, despite the fact that he was old, decrepit, and he was missing a couple of steps, and all of the data said that his ass was going to lose. I just don't understand where that faith came from. That is not a database.
Because it was too late. It was too late to do it.
But okay, fine. So then he dropped out, and they saved a couple of Senate seats because Kamala Harris brought along with her, Elisa Slotkin brought along with her several other races that if they hadn't held on to Kamala's voters, they would have been asked out. It would be a 56 seat Senate right now, as opposed to 53. We still lost. So look,
she didn't win those states. She didn't win those states.
No, but they got her voters. That's my point. They got Kamala Harris's voters. And the people that I'm talking about did not get more.
Slotkin still would have won with Joe Biden. I think Slotkin still would have won.
But Clay,
I mean, that was heartbreaking.
You are ignoring every single. Do you think that we know that the party didn't want Biden? Do you think that all these people who didn't want Biden would have been okay with Kamala if there was data showing that Kamala was going to cause them to lose as well? Of course not. They ran every single poll, every single scenario. That's
but
why
all over the country you saw senators and governors winning, and Kamala didn't win. And listen, I'm saying that Democrats really screwed it up for her for 3 weeks. There was no way to come back from that. That's my other side of it. I don't think anybody would have won. I mean, yes, Biden could have stepped down earlier, but George Clooney and these other people, they really, it was too much damage. It was too much damage done. And sadly, a lot of people said, we'll vote for everybody else on the ticket except for her.
Except for the fact that Kamala Harris got more votes than Elisa Slotkin. Kamala Harris got more votes than several of the senators that won their seats. So it was not a matter of these people won in spite of Kamala Harris. Would those people have come out when if Biden was on the ballot? Polling showed, and the post-election survey showed, that Kamala Harris did better in the swing states where she campaigned more heavily than she did in other states. Those swing states are the states where we held on to those Senate seats. So that is an important part of it. At the end of the day, every single data metric, every single polling, every single scenario was run, and every single thing told them that Joe Biden on the ticket was going to be a problem. Not just the fact that we were going to lose that, but that we were going to lose everything. We still lost, but we did not lose as bad as we would have lost. And all I'm saying is that Joe Biden fucked Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was too fucking old and everybody around him knew it. And he crashed and burned at the debate. That was 100% on Joe. Nobody sabotaged Joe. Joe got up there and he fucked up bad. And instead of stepping aside and immediately endorsing Kamala, he dilly-dallied and let his ass get dragged. So I'm not going to put it on Joe. The buck stops with the president of the United States. If you can't deliver, then guess what? Get your ass out, step aside gracefully, have a graceful transition, set up Kamala for success, give her an extra month, and put your foot down instead of having to be dragged out bloodied and screaming. So that's my position on it. Yes, I think that George Clooney ain't shit. I think a lot of people weren't shit. I was the first people to cuss people out and be like, if y'all want somebody to go up against Kamala, put a motherfucking name on it. I'm not saying that all these people didn't do something bad, but at the end of the day, it's on Joe. He knew what was going on and he fought it because he thought that he was going to be the great white hope. He thought, I alone can beat Donald Trump. And not like that, you can't. Not like that. I'm sorry. Now, if he could have, I would have been like, well, shit, just let Joe go ahead and do it. And then he probably going to step aside a year and Kamala be president. That would have worked out perfectly for me because I'm a Kamala supporter. But Joe couldn't carry the ball across the finish line. That was 100% on Joe.
Yeah, Reecie, I see it differently. I think I know that Joe Biden messed up. I know that he screwed up. I get that. But I don't think anybody could have come back from what Democrats did, the Democratic donors did. At this point, he had won the primary. I mean, it was 4 months before an election. He did really good at the State of the Union. And I do stand by the Democratic donors, the power players in the Democratic Party. They really, really screwed us up. And if this was the case that he was too terrible and he shouldn't have been in there, then they should have pulled out before that. But I don't think we would have lost. I mean, although she won areas like Virginia and New York and Jersey, she won those by small margins. Much. I mean, I always say this. Biden won Jersey by 14 points. Kamala won it by 5 points.
What polling showed Biden up by 14 points in Jersey? Just tell me one poll that showed him that in June and July.
But there were polls that were saying that Kamala Harris could beat Joe Biden, and she didn't.
You talking about a poll in 2019? I'm talking about you going all the way back to the huh?
I'm talking about polls that summer. There were polls that were saying she was the only one that could beat Donald Trump. I mean, right. And she didn't.
Yeah, she didn't. Oh, yeah, you're right. I agree that she didn't. I think that she could have ran. I think she could have beat him, but the idea that Joe Biden was wronged, I just do not agree with that at all. The idea that Joe Biden could have won, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. People ignore.
I don't know if he could have won. But I don't know if he would have lost the way that I don't know if he would have lost every swing state. Because I don't know what else Kamala Harris could have done.
Well, based on what though? But what is your basis on that? Just
based on the fact that he won
4 years earlier when he wasn't decrepit and old? What?
Based on the fact that he won before, based on the fact that we have horrible racism and sexism in this country, based on the fact that on Kamala Harris's worst day, on her worst day, she was better than Trump on his best day.
Okay.
Based on the fact that a lot of people were going to stick by him versus her, based on the fact they were trying to kick out Kamala Harris in October of 2023, they were saying she should step down. Based on the fact that Democrats ran a disgusting anti-Joe Biden and on the low anti-Kamala Harris campaign July of 2024. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know. I will never know. But my point of this conversation is that this was wrong of the Democratic Party and of George Clooney and all the Democratic donors. I can recall we had Eva McKend on here, who was at Essence, and she was talking to all these black folks on the ground at Essence, and she couldn't find one person saying that Joe Biden should step down.
Okay.
Couldn't find one person.
And what was the black turnout?
I mean, we don't know.
Turnout was down.
It's all obviously low. It's always going to be low, right? But I think that even if there was a chance of Kamala Harris to win, even if there was a chance, it was gutted at this point. It was gutted. There was no way to.
This op-ed came weeks after I don't understand. To the commenters, I don't understand why y'all can't let a conversation just, if y'all don't want to hear what we talk about, then why y'all listen? I just don't understand. Just click off and come back later. Anyway, let me ignore the chat. Let me just ignore the chat anyway, because this at the end of the day, let me just put it like this. This op-ed was nasty. It was so nasty, it was so rude.
It was nasty. It was rude. So nasty, so rude.
So nasty, so rude. But it came weeks after
12 days. 12 days.
12 days. Joe Biden also, he did a sit-down interview with George Stephanopoulos, right?
He did.
Didn't really kill it. He was okay. But when you fuck up the way that he did at that debate, then guess what? You got to kill it after that. You got to be like, nah, that was an off night. You got to be like, okay, let me shoot them threes. You know what I'm saying? Let me do some dunks. You have to kill it after that. He didn't, and he didn't have the capacity to do it. And so the fact that it dragged out that long, the fact that it got that public, a lot of people did not want it to get to that point. They were having private meetings and this, that, and the other. And he was stubborn. He did not want to let it go. And so it is just as much Joe's fault that it got to that degree publicly that it did, because he did not want to step aside. That's my position on it. Not that, at a certain point, he forced the issue. But Joe, it was not just a bad night. I'm telling you, as a person who likes Joe, and I went to the White House after he stepped aside multiple times. I got my picture with him on Christmas. I have no problem with Joe. But I saw Joe, even over the course of that year, decline in front of my face. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's a bad day. Maybe da-da-da-da-da. But with that level of scrutiny, he didn't have another misstep left before it was a complete collapse. And so, you know what? I just feel like at the end of the day, Joe not stepping aside sooner is what brought it out to be even uglier. With that being said, when Kamala stepped in, and I know they didn't want her, she invigorated the race. She raised record-breaking numbers, record-breaking signups for volunteers, all that kind of stuff. What she needed to do was to maintain the energy that she harnessed, uniquely harnessed. In July, she became a pop culture phenomenon. She was Brett. People was wearing green and da-da-da-da-da. She needed to maintain that. And I told you, Clay, I said, we had this conversation offline. I said, you know what? If this were a shorter race, I would feel even more comfortable, because you have to keep that momentum going. You have to keep that momentum going. And part of it was that energy that was so exciting that everybody went on and got their Kamala shirts and this, that, and the other. By the time October came around, you didn't see everybody walking around with Kamala shirts and chucks and pearls, and you didn't hear the chatter. That excitement kind of went away. And I think a lot of that happened because of her pivot so strong and her decision to say, okay, I'm not going to lean in on being a historic candidate or being a first Black woman and da-da-da-da. I think that changed the momentum, and it just sucked out some of the excitement. Now, there are people who believe that no matter what, she was going to lose. I'm not that person, because I saw things, and many of it's been written about, and many of it has been admitted to by her own campaign, like their decision to not talk about the trans stuff at all, and just let that ad that ran during the Super Bowl, not during the Super Bowl, but during the World Series, it's all every 5 seconds. YouTube, Tubi, every place. They made decisions.
Reece, let me ask you.
Yeah.
And I like this comment right here. Side note, I love that we're having these tough conversations. This will help us rebuild and reinvigorate our movement. Thank you. We have to look back to our history to make sure that we don't repeat shit.
Yeah. I agree.
What happened a year ago, we had never seen that in our lifetime. Yes. We had never seen a president pushed out 4 months before an election. So if we think we have a president that can't do the job, you should be on that 2 years before. If you're the Democratic donors out there and you give a lot of money and you're George Clooney and Rob Reiner, you should be on this shit years before, because you have more access than we do. You know, she didn't come on our shows. You know what I mean?
Well, to be fair, the polling had said, because I was on News Nation, I want to say in 2021, 2022, trying to defend them because the polling was saying that people didn't want him to run again. But here's the other thing that I think is lost in this conversation. The main reason why Joe Biden was even in a position to run again is because it was a shitty environment for Democrats. As soon as that Gaza stuff happened, that was it. That was it for Dems. So nobody was going to be able to run in that environment and say or do anything that much different from Joe Biden and win. Every single person had been having a shadow campaign against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris since they got inaugurated. Every single one of them. They had been going to Iowa, South Carolina. They had been running little stuff. Gavin Newsom was all over at Fox News. Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg. Every single leading Democrat was shadow running against Joe Biden and Kamala. And you know what? They couldn't get what they needed to get to justify primarying Joe or to justify primarying Kamala. The reason why, as much as Obama, Nancy Pelosi, George Clooney, all of them wanted somebody to go up against Kamala, the reason why they did it is because they had no data that said that they could beat Donald Trump, and they had no data that said that they can beat Kamala Harris. So nothing that happened out of loyalty or deference or martyring themselves for Joe or Kamala. No other Democrat had anything that said they can win. Therefore, they all fell back. And that's what Joe Biden should have done after that debate. He should have fallen back.
I just want to say this. In 2012, and I put this on my social media, at the same exact time, all the data said that President Barack Obama was going to lose, that he was bombing in the poll numbers. He had historic low approval ratings in 2012. In July of 2012. I put that on my social media. I have it on there. I never forget. Too Raw, Too Real posted it. In 1988, all the polling said Michael Dukakis was going to win. So there's that. But we feel differently about polls. It's all good. We can agree.
Because I followed the polls. I was very much following the polls with Obama. I did not have all the polls
Obama at historic lows. Historic lows.
They did not say he was going to lose.
They said no president has won with these low approval numbers.
But that's
I'll have the video.
Approval numbers is one thing, but I'm saying because I'm telling you, because I was all on 538 every day, all the time. They wasn't showing that he was going to lose.
Let me just say this. And I'm just going to say what I guess you're not supposed to say. All right. At the end of the day, I stand by that. Even on, like I said before, on Kamala Harris's worst day, she ran a better campaign than Donald Trump.
Yep.
I mean, Donald Trump, it was disgusting what he was doing. Mm-hmm. He had concepts of a plan. She murdered him in the debate. She killed him hard in the debate. I've never seen that kind of debate performance. She had her opportunity agenda. Did she make mistakes? Absolutely. But if all things were fair, she would have won. But here's the truth. And this is the thing you're not supposed to say. All things weren't fair because she is a black woman. The same thing with Hillary Clinton. If we're looking at just the policy, just the campaigning, just these things, if all things are fair, then clearly she should have won. Hillary Clinton had a better economy, and she still lost 75 months of straight job growth. So at the end of the day, and the reason why I'm leaning in on this, and George Clooney never mentions racism or sexism in his op-ed, folks they're not talking about ageism. The reason why Kamala Harris could not win is because the rich Democrats screwed up for 3 weeks. There was nothing she could do to make up for that. And what I saw November 2024, this country does not want women, especially black women, in power. And some in our own community don't want that either.
That's
true. We got Hillary Clinton and we got Kamala Harris. And she made tons of mistakes. Every campaign does. But the shit that he was doing, He had no plans. He wouldn't sit down with networks that she sat down with. It was grievance. It was anger. It was fear. It was ugly. It was trans. It was immigrants. It was questioning her blackness. All of that.
And people loved it. And people loved it.
And
You're
they
saying all
loved
of
it.
those
That's
things
who
like
this
that's a
country is.
negative. All of that stuff that he
That-
did was a positive for
my
him,
point.
not a negative.
I know, but that's who this country is. That's what this country is. And so
Yeah, I agree.
I stand in that she didn't have a chance, coupled with Democrats screwing up. So what does this mean moving forward? I mean, I'm not for these Democratic donors deciding. I mean, and then 4 months before an election, you kick, and it was so obvious they kicked him out. It was obvious.
Yeah,
It was
he
obvious he
wouldn't
was
go
being thrown.
gracefully.
Would you say it again?
I say, yeah, because he wouldn't go gracefully. They had to kick his ass out.
But I mean, it was, you just can't do that. You don't do that. What precedent? And I did my rant that every time the incumbent has stepped down and run for re-election, the opposing party always wins. We always think we're going to be different. And George Clooney thought he had all the answers, Sway, and he was wrong. And maybe if you would have did it quietly, differently, maybe. And like I said, they wanted Kamala out. They were calling for Kamala Harris to resign. They were blaming Kamala Harris at one point for the reason why Joe Biden wasn't doing better. He had the policies. He changed this country. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And were there tons of mistakes? Absolutely. There were tons of mistakes. Absolutely. But on her worst day, she was better. And the only person who has ever beat Joe Biden, ever beat Donald Trump was Joe Biden. And I just think Democrats really dropped the ball and screwed up. It's not just one thing. It's a hodgepodge. It's all of that. But if this country chose him over Kamala, him over Bill Clinton, him over Hillary Clinton, there's something going on here. Something the milk ain't clean.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a fucked up country, but that's nothing new. Like, we've been a fucked up country since the inception. You listed all the things that make Trump so horrible that were exactly what the people that voted for him wanted. You can't run generic, middle of the road, no offend nobody against flaming dragon. You got to fight fire with fire. And I said that before the election. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking. So.
Well, let's go to a call here. It is what it is. Let's go to Vincent from Pennsylvania. Is Vincent there?
All right. Let me just say this.
Say
you guys
Vincent.
are party, right? The in crowd here in Pennsylvania, and I give my advice to lawyers and doctors who really don't have time to, do that. Now listen, if Joe Biden was going to resign, he should have did it after like 3 years. But here's the deal: she should have picked Shapiro. I know for a fact the Republicans were so nervous that if she picked Shapiro, that she would have more of a legitimate shot to win. Now, that being said, the old heads got in the way, all right, and they hurt the Democratic Party. I'm talking about Clyburn, Pelosi, some of the rest of them. Now, with Hillary Clinton, and I'm gonna give you a prediction for 28, she should have picked Bernie. Bernie had the kids. She didn't. She hated Bernie. They didn't take a page out of their hero, John Kennedy. John Kennedy hated Johnson, but at that time he needed Johnson from the South to win. What did they do to Johnson? They shipped him to England as soon as they won. She could have did the same thing.
But Bernie wasn't going to bring. I mean, Bernie is an independent from Vermont. Bernie wasn't going to.
Kamala Harris got more votes than Bernie did in Vermont.
Yeah, so. Yeah. But give me your final comment, Vincent. You were saying you.
But my only thing about Pennsylvania is if Shapiro is so great, why did we lose House seats in Pennsylvania? Yeah, why did we lose the Senate seat in Pennsylvania? That's the only thing that don't click with me, because at the end of the day, he should have still been able to bring along the people in his state, regardless of him being on a ticket or not, as the governor. And we lost several key districts in Pennsylvania, and Bob Casey lost. So I'm not buying that the Shapiro was the silver bullet thing. Now, I'm glad that, you know, she picked Tim Walz, but I think the problem was they picked Tim Walz and then they told Tim Walz to keep it cute and keep it mute. Because he did a terrible job at the debate too. But if they would have let Tim Walz do Tim Walz and do the you're a weird shit and all that kind of stuff, that's what people liked, that would have been different. But allegedly, reportedly, they wanted to reel him in, and that's where he didn't bring that plus as much as initially you would have thought he would have been able to.
Thank you for your call, Vincent. Let's go to is it Karina from Florida? Karina?
Hi, Clay. Hi, Reecie. It's actually Karina.
Oh, Karina, how are you?
How are you? Thanks for all you do. I just wanted to say quickly, you know, there has been so much resistance against Joe Biden's candidacy, but looking back, I'm thinking this country lost when we decided that it was okay for Trump's candidacy. And I just don't recall seeing the fervor or the resistance against him being allowed to run in the first place. And I can't help but wonder, what would a No Kings protest have looked like at that time if we protested against his candidacy? So I don't know if anyone could have beaten him at that point. And I don't even think we should be having that conversation, who should beat him, because he should not have been allowed to run. Insurrection is right there in the Constitution, and I think we null and voided it at that point in time. So now he's in the race, and it was more talk of who can beat Trump as opposed to he shouldn't even be allowed to run. And that's my take on that.
Thank you for your call. Appreciate you.
But I also just want to point out that who wins and who loses is not inevitable. A lot of it boils down to campaign. It boils down to strategy. Barack Obama was the most unlikely person to ever win the presidency. The most unlikely person. But you know what he did?
Polling
he came
was on the side either. Polling was not on the side.
And he was a black man who had a Kenyan father and a white mama. So, and they made his wife out to be like she was a terrorist sympathizer, like she was, you know, fucking, you know, Black Panther or something. But you know what he did? He came in and he revolutionized the way that campaigns are run. They had the data. They had you had never seen a campaign run like Obama. Obama won through campaigning. Now, the Republicans campaign a very, very different way. And we saw the difference in terms of, you know, how that mapped out. They hardly had any grassroots stuff. They didn't do the door knocking, the canvassing and stuff. They focused their stuff on micro targeting, on digital ads, on media, you know, alternative media, things like that. Also, they had just years of disinformation working for them. They never stopped campaigning. They never stopped pumping out information that is detrimental to the other side and that paints them in a good light. Look at the Social Security Administration sending out bogus fucking emails about what the big, beautiful bill did. And look at right now, you see pro-Trump ads in any streaming service with commercials. So Republicans just tend to run better campaigns. It doesn't look like it's a better campaign to us, but number one, they win. And number two, they do things differently than how Democrats do. And that's not a Kamala Harris thing. That's just a Democratic thing. We talked about it for years, the need for information infrastructure. Then after the campaign, Jen O'Malley Dillon is calling it an ecosystem. Okay, girl, you want to have a thesaurus for what I've been saying for years. You know, Democrats, their strategy, we should be already working on 2028 right now. Not a candidate, but the ecosystem and all kind of stuff. So it's just different, but you can win an improbable campaign if you run the right campaign. You can win an improbable campaign if you're exceptionally talented, and you can win if you have an exceptional campaign strategy and execution. Those are the two things that make an improbable candidate a winner. The last person I would say, it's not national, but let's take a look at Wes Moore. He was polling at 3% in a crowded Democratic primary field. And I said, this man is going to win. Why? Because he would go everywhere, because he had a great message, and he was doing the work, and that he was a compelling figure. And he went on to become the first Black elected statewide. We had never had a Black elected statewide, independent. I mean, we've had Black lieutenant governors, but they run as a joint ticket. He became the first Black governor. And so All I'm saying is that, yes, there could be odds against you. And I think it's going to be damn near impossible for a woman to become a nominee. And I said, white girls, if you ever want to be president, you better make sure Kamala goes first, because if she loses and Hillary Clinton lost, y'all can forget about having a woman president. Y'all can forget that shit. Nobody's going for that. But at the end of the day, I still would not count somebody out. And I still would stand 10 toes down and say that July, a couple days after this thing, July 2024, Kamala would have won. But September, October, Kamala was in July, Kamala. That's why she lost in my opinion.
Well, one of the key things with Obama you bring out is that, one, we didn't have Citizens United. We didn't have Citizens United, which really has changed our elections completely, the money that's in our elections. And I just want to remind people that, we talk about the people and the American people, that a year ago, there was some crazy foolishness going down. Like you said, George Clooney, all that, it was crazy. It was crazy. It was madness like I've never seen. And so I just hope the power players, the Democratic Party, they can be sure to get it together, get clear. And if there is chaos coming, nip it in the bud now. You can't do it 4 months before an election. And all the things that he said would happen, if Joe Biden didn't step down, they happened anyway. And now look where we are. And maybe doing things quietly on the low. Hell, they did.
They did try that, Clay. Now they tried that. And he was.
It started immediately. It started after June 27th. It started immediately.
Yeah.
It started it went on and on and on. And then what they didn't like is when we were here and they were going to skip over Kamala Harris, and they were like, "Damn, how could we mix this one up? Damn."
That was the plot twist. They weren't looking at that. They were not thinking about that, which was dumb on their part. My takeaway is this: two things. Number one, the base is how you win elections. The Republicans understand that. And yet Democrats lose. They lose their base and they immediately go back to talking about white people that they ain't won in decades. And, we need to pick somebody that's going to appeal to the white people that they haven't won, no matter who was the candidate, in decades. So number one, you got to do the base. I said it was going to be a turnout election. I said it was going to be a base election. And it was instead appealed to Liz Cheney voters. And they ran the ads talking about white women. Your husband won't know how you voted. That was some of the dumbest fucking shit I've ever seen in my entire life. That wasn't how you were going to win the election, was white women going against their husband's wishes. Be fucking for real. Number two is, it don't really matter what these Democratic power players say or do. You want to know why? Because people have the power. Look at what happened in New York City with Mamdani. He came from nowhere. He beat out Andrew Cuomo. He got record votes. He had a strategy because it was ranked choice voting. You know what they did differently? They said, okay, we're going to cross endorse. We're going to have a strategy on how you rank each person. And that strategy allowed him to win. So again, what I said, campaigns. You got to run the right campaign for the race and for the constituents you're trying to win over. He wasn't trying to win over Republicans. He wasn't trying to win over people that ain't going to ever be with him. He just leaned in to what he wanted to run on, what he thought resonated, and that worked out perfectly for him. And he's still...
No, that is the primary, though. You pointed this out. That is the primary. Now we have to see what happened with the progressive, quote unquote.
That's true.
In general.
But the polling is showing him up comfortably. And if Cuomo, even if you put Cuomo and Eric Adams' numbers together, that still doesn't beat Mamdani. The Republican ain't going nowhere. And so I don't know if he'll win or not, but my whole point is that was a person who was the most improbable winner of that race. And the voters decided. And it was tens of millions of dollars put forth to smear him and make him out to be the scary Muslim immigrant, and he still won. And so I don't want to hear about how impossible it is, how improbable it is, how inevitable it is going to be that if you're of this demographic, you're going to lose, when we actually have the power to determine otherwise.
Let's head to a break. You want to talk on the chat, Reecie?
Sure. I'll go back to the chat. I can constantly, people... I'm gonna go back to the chat. I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna go back and be
Somebody
nice.
said, can we go back to a ratchet music discussion? Y'all are just so trifling. Y'all are just so trifling. Okay, let's head to a break. Clay Kane Show with my girl, Reecie Colbert. Be right back.
Let's see. Okay. Gigi says Dem leaders are not supporting him. I'm assuming you're talking about Mamdani. And guess what? It don't matter because he's still winning. I think that these endorsements and these gatekeepers, they don't have as much power as they believe that they have. They don't have as much relevancy if people vote. That's the thing. People got to vote. Now people can shit post on social media and be like, oh, the neoliberal establishment, and not get out and vote, and then they just gonna complain. But people got out and voted for Mamdani. So, I think it don't really matter if people don't, who doesn't support them, as long as the voters do. So let's see. Oh, I can highlight people. What's going on? So, maybe Clay is doing this in the background. Who can beat Trump should have never been a damn conversation. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. Let's see. Dems need to stop hogging the mic and appoint activists, workers, campaign workers. Now, I wonder what you mean by that. My favorite color is I like purple. I like red. Those are my favorite colors. Let's see. Need to know for September 13th are in Philadelphia. Oh, okay. Let me see. Joe Biden should have ran president second term. Yeah. I think the best thing would my perfect scenario would have been Joe Biden resigning, letting Kamala be president, because if she was president, then it takes away the whole, we can't have one presidents are weak. That's what. But I knew that was going to happen. So it is what it is. Let's see. We need to primary all the people trying to bash Mamdani. I don't think that's going to happen. I just, what? I think it's okay if people don't support him. Who cares? You don't need 100% of the votes. You only need the plurality, or in some cases, the 50% plus one vote. So, yeah. John, yep. When they look at the Wisconsin race. All right, y'all, I got to go. Bye.